Thank you, Alexus. So one day my phone rang and it was a number I didn't recognize. I could tell it was international, but I didn't know who it was. So I pick it up and it's a woman from Vancouver, Canada. She confirms that I'm Anna and she tells me that my sister has been living with her in her home and she's worried about her. My sister's not doing well. Her mental health appears to be in question. This woman tells me that she's worried that my sister may be a danger to herself or other people. She's giving me little bits of the story, but ultimately tells me, you can either come get her or I'm going to call an institution and I'm going to have her sent to a hospital. So I put down the phone, I call my mother. It turns out that this woman has also reached out to my mother. I guess she had picked it up through the phone lines of my sister calling us. And so we scramble to think about what are we going to do next? And we decide that we're going to go and try to get my sister from Vancouver. At the time, my mom is living in Tucson and I'm in Portland. And my mom books a flight to come up to meet me in Portland. And we're going to drive up there. Vancouver's maybe 5-6 hours. And in this moment, I'm trying to make sense of what could actually be happening. I'm taking this woman at her, word. But the reality is I hadn't seen my sister in years at this point. And if I'm honest, I really had been disconnected from my sister for most of my life. My parents had a very difficult and abrupt divorce when I was 10. We were living in France at the time, and our family separated with my mother, my brother, and I moving to the US, leaving my sister and my father behind. And for years and years, just the mere thought of my sister made me feel so bad. Even though it wasn't really my decision, I always felt in some way like I had abandoned her, and she would write me these letters begging me to move back. And I never had the heart to tell her that I didn't want to, because I was happy being in the US and I was happy to not be around my father. And all of this was too much to share. So I would just keep my distance and write maybe a few times a year, to keep some ties. And over the years, we had different memories. She would come to visit, I would go back, but really she wasn't somebody that I always considered a sister. And this didn't really change when she moved to Vancouver. The last time I'd seen her in person was we were both living in Tucson, and we just couldn't be more different people. At the time, I was 22. I had this stable, simple, all-American boyfriend. We were getting ready to get married. We were planning to move to the suburbs up in Portland. I was planning a life that just was away from my family. And my sister, she was the kind of person that just had these mood swings that were both lovable and a little bit scary. She was this charming girl that would wear bright colors all the time. She would put her hair up in these little buns that she would hold together with different colored pencils. She would leave you these little colorful notes around the house that didn't make a lot of sense, but there was love in them. And she had this charm where she could get just about any man to do whatever she wanted. One guy she meets at an airport. Next thing you know, she's moving to LA to go live with him until she gets a little bored and she moves to Paris instead and decides she's going to be an au pair. And this guy, who was an actual producer in Hollywood, leaves his career, follows her to Paris, and then they have some romance and they break up. And she was just that kind of person, just this roller coaster. And I tried very hard to be the opposite. Well, that was the last time I saw her. So it's about 4 years later at this point, and my mom arrives in Portland, and we're driving to Vancouver to get my sister. And meanwhile, we're texting with this woman. We're trying to figure out the best plan to do this. I knew enough to know that my sister probably didn't trust my mother very much. In many ways, my sister very much felt betrayed by my mother in the way that she left, didn't have a lot of trust towards her. And so I'm telling my mother, let me be the person to talk to her. Whatever we do, I need you to stay silent. Promise me you're going to stay silent and just let me take the lead. And the woman that we're texting with says that she's usually out during the daytime, but she comes home in the evening, so we should plan on arriving in the evening. And it's Thanksgiving week. It's, that Pacific Northwest weather, a little drizzly, it's cold. We're pulling in to Vancouver. We're texting the woman. She's confirming my sister's there. Okay, so we arrive and we knock quietly and we come into the house. And the woman tells us that my sister is staying in a room in the back, and she directs us. And I look back at my mother, I confirm her plan, and we go to the door and we knock, and my sister opens, and she's shocked. It's clear that she's very much taken aback. She didn't expect to see us. And we go into her bedroom, and We're just trying to explain the situation as calmly as possible. We're telling her we got this phone call. We don't know what to make of it, but she needs to come with us because she can no longer stay at this home. And my sister is obviously very scared. She's very upset. She doesn't know where we're taking her. Frankly, we don't even know where we're taking her. We just know that we don't want her to be put into a hospital in Canada. And she's trying to reason with us. And we're like, there is no plan B. You can come with us or you don't have a home. And she's looking back and forth between my mother and myself, and she's scouring her eyes, like she's looking, and I'm trying with the best of my abilities to stare straight at her and make her know through my eyes that she can trust us, that we don't have bad intentions, that we're here for her, that we love her. And I'm just trying to communicate that directly into her eyes. And she finally asks for a moment, and we step outside, and we're waiting in the living room. And the next thing we see is my sister coming out of the room. And it appears that everything that she owns is in 2 duffel bags and a backpack. And she says that she's ready to go. So we say goodbye to this family and we step outside into this evening. And once we get outside, we decide, let's go get something to eat for dinner. And then we're going to go stay in a hotel and then we'll figure out what to do next. And then my sister starts to negotiate with us at this point. She says, well, why don't we go by bus? Well, that doesn't make sense. We have a car right here. It's raining. Why, we don't know the bus system. Just come with us in the car. And she keeps insisting, come with us, come with us. And the only thing I can make sense of it is that she probably would have felt safer on the bus because she knew the bus system and we didn't. And it was a way for her to maintain some degree of control in this really unpredictable moment. And we're getting increasingly frustrated and she's refusing to get in the car. And then my mom finally loses her patience and she speaks up. And she says, you're being ridiculous. Just get in the car. It's raining. Like everybody's cold. Just let's go. And that tone was enough to set my sister off. And so she slowly starts to step away from us. And I slowly step after her. And then she starts to walk. And then I walk. And then her pace starts to pick up. And within a moment, she's in a full run. And I am running after her because I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to do. I was just acting from impulse. She's getting out of my range. I try to grab onto her backpack and it slips between my fingers. And this all feels surreal. I don't really know what success looks like anymore. She's running. I'm running after her. We start to round the corner. We pass this young woman where my sister is screaming to her saying, help me. This woman is chasing me. And I'm looking at her going, but I'm her sister. And I think that that's enough to say that that's a safe thing. And the woman doesn't want anything to do with either of us. So we keep running and we round another corner. At this point, we're on a main street, the east side of Vancouver, and my sister runs into a laundromat. And at one moment, I'm kind of relieved because I'm like, well, why would you do that? Because now we can clearly see where you are and I can get to you. And at the same moment that I'm standing in front of this laundromat thinking of my next move, a police car rolls up next to me. And I look over and I'm not sure if they're for me or what's the situation. And the police officer comes out and he explains that the family had been watching us the whole time out while we're having the conversation on the street. And as soon as my sister started to look like she was not going to go with us, they went ahead and called the police. And so they were actually coming to figure out what was going on. And I explained my sister's in this laundromat. She's not well. We need her to come with us. And they go into the laundromat and my sister's not in there. It's a really small place. There's no way she could be hiding somewhere. And they say, well, there's actually a back door. So she's probably long since already gone out the back door and continued. And it's been about 10, 15 minutes at this point. And who knows where she is. And she's probably gone. At this point, my mom catches up with us. And there's 2 things happening. My mother is in full fix-it mode. She is grilling this Canadian police officer, asking him, where's the precincts? Where's the community centers? Where's the shelters? Where do people hang out? How can we find her? Where are the typical things? If people are living on the streets, what are the go-to places? Things like that. And I'm just sort of numb. And I'm looking up at this police officer who's got these big eyes and he's looking at my mom and he's not really sure how to comfort her. And I find myself looking at him going like, does he know that we're different? Like, we're not those people. We're not that kind of family. We're not whatever you think we are. We're not. And I'm wondering what all he's seen on these streets. And there's people passing by and everybody's sort of like rubbernecking, looking back at us. And I know that because I've been that person. I've been the person trying to not look at a train wreck, and I'm doing it, except this time it's me. Like, it's our family that everybody's rubbernecking to look at. And finally, this police officer tries to comfort my mother by saying, I know this isn't easy for you to hear, but there's nothing that says people have to be in relationship with their family. They can choose to live on the streets. They can choose to not have contact. That's their choice. And my mother's not liking this, and she keeps pressing. And at some point, we start to apologize to him, and because we realize that, he's here to kind of solve a crime, and there's nothing really to do. And he says, it's okay. I realize at this point, my job is really more of a social worker than anything, and kind of feel bad for him. And we head back to this family's home where my sister had been staying, and they invite us in to have dinner. And so we take him up on it, and we're having dinner, and they're giving us some updates about different things, interactions they've had with my sister's, reasons why they thought she wasn't doing well, and erratic mood swings. There's all sorts of guesses about OCD or bipolar and ups and downs and things like that. And I'm just numb. I'm not saying anything. I'm completely like just my eyes glazed over. And my mom is still in fix-it mode. And she's like, okay, can we stay here tonight and then look around the city tomorrow? And the woman agrees, and my mom pays for us to stay there, pays my sister's back rent, and we're staying that night in the exact same room that my sister had been staying the night before, and it's completely surreal. And we wake up the next day, and my mom is asking me to drive her around, and I take her to shelters and community offices and precincts and libraries, and she's having conversations with people that are visibly on drugs and clearly living on the streets. And she's, just absolutely fearless with all this. And I am just not sure what to make of it. And finally, we go back to this home for dinner that night. And the woman that we're staying with looks at me at one point and starts to see that I'm getting tired, and makes some comment that makes me feel really seen. And it causes my mom to actually look at me, and then she sees me. And then she shifts her mind and says, okay, well, maybe it doesn't make sense for me to be running around a city looking for a daughter who doesn't want anything to do with me at the expense of you. And I received that, and we decided to drive back that very night. And on the drive back to Portland, what was me being numb switches to anger. And I am just feeling rage, and I am taking it out on my mother. I am blaming her for having taken my sister from me, for the fact that, she's so fierce now. She's doing everything now, but where was she when my sister was 13, 14 and like left behind in France? And I'm saying words that are so cruel, I can't even fully remember them at this point. And I am just everything that I feel, all of the ways in which our family had been destroyed, all the ways that we had never healed from this, I'm throwing it all onto my mother, and I am crying. The highway starts to get blurry because I just can't put my mind together. And my mother is receiving this. And we get back to Portland. It's Thanksgiving week. We try to make the best of what is a holiday at this point. And we're not really sure whatever happened with my sister. And thankfully, we do receive an email where she clarifies that she did, in fact, run out the back door. She calls this moment an act of God, that God had provided an escape for her to get away from us. And she is now choosing to live on the streets. She's spending her days in the library and her nights in shelters if she can make it. And she asks us to not have contact with her, but instead asks us for money. And that was 2009. And I wasn't really sure if I'd ever see her again. I wanted to respect her desire, even if it didn't make sense. And at this point, I'm just mostly so upset that I'm now grouped into being with my mother on this. I've lost my personal relationship with my sister. And shortly after, we find out that she actually did make it back to the US and in fact is living in Portland. We had contact with a friend of hers, and he tells us that she's in Portland. And my mother is sure that she's made this decision because of me. But I'm like, but she hasn't reached out to me. She hasn't my email. She hasn't contacted me. I don't think this has anything to do with me. I don't even know where she's living. And so for about 3 years, I lived side by side in Portland with my sister, her never reaching out to us and never responding to any emails. And I had all but given up on ever seeing her again when I decided I was actually going to be moving out of Portland. This was in 2012. And I was getting ready to go back to get my master's in Beirut in the Middle East. And it's about 2 weeks before I am set to leave. I'm literally shopping for the food for my going away party. And I'm in this grocery store and I see her. Her mannerisms are a little bit fidgety, I'll just say. It's clear by her dress, by her mannerisms, that she's clearly living a life likely on the streets. It's also clear that she's probably using drugs, which is something that she had never really been doing. And her eyes are sort of looking around the store. And I could tell that she's got some sort of plan, but she's not really doing anything. She's got a plastic bag in her hand. And I know I want to talk to her, but I know I don't want to scare her. And so I'm just sort of watching her moves, and I'm sort of pacing near her, but not too close. And I'm trying to find a good moment where I can get in front of her without scaring her. And I find a moment where I just place myself within her sight, but I keep my distance. And she's surprised, but she doesn't look scared, and she doesn't look like she's going to run. And so I get closer to her and say hi. And we have this very small conversation where she reiterates that she knows that my mother would like to have contact, would like her to come to Tucson. She doesn't want to have any contact. She does confirm for me that she is living on the streets. And she tells me not to worry. She says that she has a community there. She says that if she were to have a heart attack and fall backwards, there would be people there to catch her. They're her family. And I smile, and I say, that's good. I'm happy for you. And I confirm that she still knows how to find us if she needed to. And she does. And I tell her, because I'm leaving, I'm moving to the Middle East. I'm going to school. And she looks at me with these bug eyes. She's like, you're moving to the Middle East? That's crazy. And I'm looking at her going, yeah, maybe it is. But then I'm looking at her going, I feel like what you're doing is crazy. And we exchange this moment, and I just say, okay, yeah. And I say goodbye, and I leave. And that's the last time that I saw my sister in person. I haven't had any contact since. And in 2015, when I met Alexus, I went to that Blue Christmas service that she was talking about. As she mentioned, I was not going because I was like, oh yeah, Blue Christmas, that's my thing. I didn't even know what it was. My family was in Tucson. I was living in Phoenix at the time. And I was like, I can see them tomorrow. I think she's a cool lady. I want to support her. I've never really seen her tell a story. And so I go to this Blue Christmas service. And as she mentioned, it was sort of sparsely attended. It was this massive, beautiful Methodist church in downtown Phoenix. And there were so few people that we had like 3 pews to each other. And we were just sort of spread out throughout this thing, just, all over the place. And she tells this amazing story. It's so powerful. And then she invites us to name our loss. And the room goes dark, the energy goes inside, and I'm sort of thinking through it on my own. And then the invitation is to actually name it out loud. And one by one, you just hear these echoes throughout this large building, and people are naming children lost, family members. And I get this, like, my heart rate starts to race, and I can feel the words start to bubble up in my stomach, and they want to come out. And finally, I just blurt it out. I say, my sister that I haven't seen in 6 years. And then the words just sort of like hang out there, and nothing happens. And then the service closes, and we slowly walk out. I think we're singing Silent Light, if memory serves me correctly, and we've got these candles. And we get outside the door, and something very strange happens at this moment, which is that none of us want to leave. I mean, you'd think going to like a Blue Christmas service, it's sad. People probably don't really want to chat afterwards. They just want to go home and cry. But nobody really leaves. We all just left the building, but then stayed right there. And then I start to feel something strange, which is actual joy. I was feeling this lightness and this like just overwhelming joy. And people are asking if they can hug me, and we're all hugging each other and laughing and crying. And I am just in bliss. And I'm going, this doesn't make any sense. How did I just name the most painful thing that doesn't make any sense to me? And I'm feeling joy. And the only thing I can think of is that this service was the first time that I got to just name this story, name my sister, without it being filled with a fix-it plan or something that we can do to change the past, change the future, change reality, to, guilt trip myself about things I've done or not done, or regrets and shame. It was just this space for what is. And, as I've been thinking about doing this service today, you always, as a storyteller, want to have this like resolution for the story, right? And the reality is, I don't think I'm ever going to have this perfect little resolution for this story. I'm never going to get to take this story and to package it up into this neat little bow where it's all tied up and it makes perfect sense. It won't. There's never going to be a time that I think of her and it's not excruciating pain. But also, the story of my sister simply is. And I have to accept that. Thank you.
Wow.